Welcome to my YouTube channel. Please subscribe my channel. That's not just a question about ancient artifacts. That's a question about you, about what lies buried beneath your everyday life, beneath the dust and distractions, beneath fear and failure. You see, the ark was more than gold and angels and tablets. It was presence, it was promise, it was power. And the real question is, have you lost yours? Many chase relics, thinking if they can touch history, they'll find holiness. But the ark was never about where it was about who was there. The same presence that filled the ark in the Holy of Holies once now seeks to dwell not behind stone or curtain, but inside the temple of your heart. So when Jonathan Cahn asks, is this the lost Ark of the Covenant? Maybe what he's really asking is, what have you misplaced that you once held sacred? Was it your hope, your calling, your courage to believe again? Beneath the temple of your routine may lie the very thing you thought was gone forever. In 1967, a soldier walked through the alleys of Jerusalem after the Six-Day War, dust and smoke still hanging in the air. He wasn't searching for glory. He was just following a feeling. Down an unmarked path, he found himself at the Western Wall. He wept, not because he found something new, but because something ancient had returned. You don't need to climb mountains or crawl through caves to find what was lost. Often, it's waiting where you last left it, in the silence of prayer. In the act of kindness, you paused. In the dream, you shelved for something more realistic. It's not gone, it's just waiting. Maybe you failed. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you've stopped expecting anything more from life than survival. But remember this, what is buried is not always dead. Sometimes it's planted. Look at a seed. It disappears into soil, forgotten. But beneath the dark, something stirs. Not despite the dirt, but because of it. The pressure, the darkness, the waiting. Those are the ingredients for resurrection. The same goes for you. Michelangelo once said, I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free. The lost ark, maybe it's still under the mount, or maybe it's under the layers of compromise and disappointment in your own life. But if you keep chiseling, if you keep showing up, keep believing, you'll uncover what no eye has seen, what no algorithm can predict your calling in full bloom. There was a man, let's call him David, not the shepherd boy, not the king, just a man like you. He once felt the fire of purpose, then watched it fade. One day he stood in a quiet chapel, no thunder, no visions. Just a whisper, return to the place you dropped the keys. He knew instantly what it meant. He went back not to a building, but to a decision he once made and walked away from. That day he picked up more than keys. He picked up himself. You don't need to find the ark to carry the presence. You are the temple. You are the story still being written. Don't wait for the world to confirm your worth before you believe it. The divine doesn't need a platform to move. It only needs a heart willing to say yes. So dig. Dust off, return. Because what was once thought lost can be found, not under stone, but in surrender. The ark is not just a chest in a chamber. It is the reminder that what you carry inside is holy. You were never lost, just waiting to be uncovered. What is buried is not always dead, sometimes it's planted. That simple truth can change the way you see everything in your life. We are taught in our culture to fear burial, to see darkness, delay, and silence as signs of failure or abandonment. But what if you've been misreading the signs? What if what looks like the end is actually the beginning of transformation? Think of a seed. When a seed is buried in the soil, it doesn't scream, it doesn't shine, it doesn't tweet an update or post a filtered version of its process. It just goes in, silently, hidden, forgotten by most, covered in darkness. subject to forces it doesn't control, and yet it is doing the most important work of its life. It is breaking, expanding, cracking open, reaching down before it ever reaches up. That process is not death, it's preparation. You might feel buried. Maybe your dreams have been covered by bills, disappointment, doubt, or the expectations of others. Maybe your voice has been lost in a sea of louder ones. Maybe the passion you once carried burns only as a flicker now. You look around and wonder where the light went. But pause. What if the silence isn't rejection, but incubation? In agriculture, there's a phenomenon known as dormancy. It's a survival mechanism. Seeds will lie dormant through winter, through drought, through frost, until the conditions are right. Some seeds even require fire or extreme pressure before they sprout. Isn't that extraordinary? What appears to be destruction is actually activation. Your life is not a straight line. It's a series of seasons. A seed doesn't bloom in all of them, and neither will you. But that doesn't mean you're failing, it means you're aligning. The delay isn't denial, it's timing. A buried seed is not a wasted one. There's a reason why the deepest growth happens in the dark. It's quiet there. The noise of comparison, judgment, and distraction gets muffled. In the dark, your roots have space to search for water, to strengthen, to stabilize. You may not have the spotlight, but you are forming substance. The kind of substance that can hold up the weight of your future success. Many people want the fruit, but they skip the root. They want visibility without depth, influence without integrity, speed without surrender, but fruit without root falls fast. If you're being buried now, rejoice. You're being given the opportunity to develop unseen strength. That's a sacred gift, even if it doesn't feel like one. In ancient times, olive trees had to endure years of hardening before they produced usable oil. The crushing of the olive was necessary for the oil to flow. Likewise, some of the greatest callings require great crushing, not to destroy you, but to extract from you what was placed in you for such a time as this. Have you ever thought about how caterpillars become butterflies? It sounds poetic until you learn what really happens. Inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar doesn't just grow wings, it dissolves completely. It becomes a soup of cells, unrecognizable, messy, without form. And out of that surrender, a new creation is born. A creature that can fly, a creature that never returns to crawling. So if you feel like your life has turned into something unrecognizable, if your plans have fallen apart, if everything you knew about yourself is shifting, don't panic. That's not failure. That's metamorphosis. What's buried is not always dead. Sometimes it's planted, but planting and burying look the same on the surface. One leads to growth, the other to decay. The difference isn't in the dirt, it's in what's inside. You are not a casualty. You are a carrier of dreams, of purpose, of light. And if the world can't see it now, it doesn't mean it's gone. It means it's germinating. Let it trust the process even when it feels like silence. Some of the most powerful transformations happen where no one is watching. Joseph in the Bible was buried by betrayal, by injustice, by forgotten promises, sold into slavery, thrown into prison, misunderstood, left behind, year after year. But something was growing in him that couldn't be seen. When the time was right, he rose to a position of influence he never could have orchestrated on his own. The pit did not cancel the promise. It prepared him for it. Look at the tree. It doesn't panic in winter. It doesn't rush spring. It doesn't compare itself to the one beside it that's blooming earlier. It trusts its rhythm. It trusts its roots. And in due time, it blossoms. So will you. So the question isn't whether you've been buried. It's whether you're willing to believe that the darkness still holds destiny, that the silence still speaks, that something in you is unfolding even when everything around you seems stuck. Every artist knows this tension. The moment before inspiration hits, the blank canvas, the waiting, the silence that feels like emptiness but is actually full of potential. Every musician, writer, builder, every visionary knows the buried season, the time when no one claps, no one sees, no one affirms, and yet they keep showing up, keep creating, keep digging, because they believe in what hasn't bloomed yet. Farmers don't plant and then dig up the soil 2 days later in panic, asking, "Where's my harvest?" They understand the law of gestation, the law of patience, of unseen work. That's wisdom, that's maturity, that's faith. You may not feel progress, but growth is often silent. Think of bamboo. For the first 5 years, it barely grows above ground. But during that time, it's building a vast, intricate root system. Then suddenly, in the 5th year, it can grow up to 90 feet in just a few weeks. If you judged it by year 3, you'd call it a failure. But you'd be wrong. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. Some of the most beautiful things are hidden before they are revealed. Diamonds form under pressure. Pearls are formed by irritation. Gold is refined by fire. Your buried season is doing something essential. It's removing what can't go with you into your next chapter. Ego, impatience, distraction, all of it gets sifted underground. And what emerges is more real, more resilient, more ready. Even the resurrection required a tomb, a burial, 3 days of silence. It's easy to skip to the joy of Easter morning, but don't miss the power of Saturday, that stillness, that in-between, that mystery of what's happening when nothing seems to be happening. That sets where faith is forged. And maybe that's exactly where you are, buried under uncertainty, buried under loss, buried under responsibilities that no one claps for, buried beneath the noise of a world moving too fast. But what if God isn't panicking? What if heaven sees your silence as sacred ground? You don't need to strive your way out. You need to stay rooted, because rooted things don't fear the wind. Rooted things don't chase approval. Rooted things know who they are even when no one else does. And rooted things, when the season turns, become forests. So be gentle with your process. Don't rush to bloom just because someone else is. Don't curse the dirt. Don't despise the delay. Don't believe the lie that because it's hard, it's wrong. You're not buried to be forgotten. You're planted to grow. Return to the place you dropped the keys. There's something quietly haunting about that sentence. Not because it suggests failure, but because it invites responsibility. It asks you to stop, to turn around, to remember where you were when something precious slipped from your hands, something simple, sacred, irreplaceable. The keys are never far, but they will not find you. You must go back and pick them up. In life, most of us don't lose things all at once. We lose them gradually. A little compromise here, a shortcut there, a promise delayed then forgotten, a passion postponed until someday, which never comes. We drop the keys not with a dramatic crash, but often with a whisper. And because the world keeps spinning, we convince ourselves they weren't that important. We move on, limping forward, unaware that we've left behind what once unlocked our joy, our purpose, our clarity. The keys represent something different for each person. For one, it might be integrity left behind in a meeting where silence felt safer than truth. For another, it could be creativity abandoned in the noise of busyness and perfectionism. For someone else, maybe it was love, faith, wonder. Maybe it was their voice, their courage, their sense of self. The story of dropping the keys is not about shame. It's about memory, recollection, a kind of gentle honesty that does instead accuse but invites, like a loving father who says, let's walk back together. You were holding it once, you can hold it again. Think of the first time you felt truly alive. The first time you did something not for applause or approval, but because it burned inside you. Maybe it was a song you wrote, a stand you took, a friendship you pursued, a prayer you whispered into the dark. You held the keys then. You walked in alignment. But over time, life got louder. Pressure mounted. Pain entered. And slowly, without even noticing, you let go. The strange thing about lost keys is that we often replace them instead of retrieving them. We adapt. We build new routines around our locked doors. We tell ourselves, maybe I didn't need that room anyway. We find distractions to dull the ache, but deep down the door remains, unopened, waiting, a part of our soul still listening for the jingle. Sometimes, returning to the place you dropped the keys means going back to a literal moment in time, a conversation you never finished, a boundary you never enforced, a decision you never made. Other times, it's not about a place on a map, but a place in your memory, a version of yourself you buried, a dream you dared not touch again. This kind of return isn't always comfortable, because to go back, you have to remember. And memory carries weight. It's easier to forget, to forge ahead, to pretend the locked door doesn't exist. But healing only begins where honesty is welcomed. And honesty begins when you're willing to retrace your steps. There's a story of Peter in the Bible that captures this. The same Peter who promised loyalty to Jesus and then denied him 3 times. After the resurrection, Jesus doesn't confront him in a temple or demand repentance before a crowd. He meets him by a fire, the same setting as his denial. He cooks him breakfast. And then quietly, lovingly, he asks, "Do you love me?" 3 times, matching the 3 denials. It wasn't punishment. It was restoration. Jesus led Peter back to the place he dropped the keys, not to shame him, but to return what was lost. That's the invitation. Not to beat yourself up, but to allow yourself to be restored. To walk with humility back into the places where you stopped believing, where you stopped trying, where you gave up because it hurt too much to hope. The return is not glamorous. It often begins with silence, stillness, a quiet walk back through the corridors of your own story. Maybe you remember the moment when you lost your voice, when someone laughed, dismissed, or wounded you, and you decided never to speak like that again. That's a place to go back to, not to relive the pain, but to retrieve the power. Maybe you lost your wonder slowly over years of disappointment. You stopped asking questions, stopped believing in miracles, stopped noticing the sunrise. That's a place to return to, not to manufacture joy, but to find the key that once unlocked all. There's a myth that time heals everything, but time only dulls what's not addressed. True healing comes from intention, from revisiting, from reclaiming. And reclaiming requires vision. You have to believe the keys are still there, that the door is still worth opening, that the life you longed for wasn't a mistake, but a map. In psychology, there's a concept called unfinished business, the emotional residue left behind when something important is left incomplete. A conversation never had, a truth never told, a goodbye never given. These things linger. They shape how we relate, how we trust, how we see the world. Returning to where we dropped the keys means addressing that business, not as victims, but as stewards of our own healing. It's humbling, yes, but it's also empowering, because you're not waiting for someone else to rescue you. You're choosing to take responsibility for what was left behind. That kind of courage is rare. That kind of clarity changes lives. There's a scene in many mystery stories where the detective returns to the scene of the crime, not to mourn, but to observe what they missed. They retrace steps, re-interview witnesses, they slow down, look deeper, And often what was once invisible suddenly becomes obvious. In your life, the clues are there. The memory, the feeling, the restlessness that won't go away. You don't have to solve everything at once. But if you slow down, revisit, listen, you may find the key was never truly lost. It was just waiting for you to look again, this time with wiser eyes. The key you dropped may not be physical, but it affects everything. It's the permission to be who you are, to tell the truth, to dream again. It's the belief that you're allowed to begin again, even if the world says otherwise. Children lose things all the time. Toys, socks, teeth, but they rarely panic the way adults do. They trust that what's lost can be found. They ask for help. They retrace their steps. They don't pretend the missing object never mattered. They care deeply, and that's something we would do well to learn. We grow up and pretend the keys didn't matter, that our true desires were childish, that the vision we carried was naive. But maybe that vision was the truest thing we've ever known. Maybe we don't need to outgrow it. Maybe we need to return to it. Return to that book you were writing, that song you were singing, that relationship you stopped fighting for, that voice you stopped trusting. Return not with the urgency to fix everything, but with the quiet resolve to not leave that part of yourself behind again. You may find that the place you dropped the keys is not a place of weakness, but of tenderness, that the version of you who set them down wasn't failing, but just tired, or scared, or unsure of what came next. That part of you doesn't need judgment. It needs compassion. You are not too far gone. The door is not permanently locked. The path is not erased. You don't have to wait for perfect conditions or for someone to give you permission. You are the one holding the decision now. You are the one who can turn around. You are the one who knows deep down exactly where the keys were left. You don't need to find the ark to carry the presence. You are the temple. This is not a metaphor for someday. It's a reality for now. For too long, people have searched outside themselves for something sacred, expecting to stumble upon glory like some ancient artifact hidden beneath centuries of dust and stone. They chase signs, symbols, relics, always believing that holiness is somewhere far off, stored in a vault or guarded behind walls. But the truth is more confronting and far more empowering. You don't have to find the ark to be near the divine. You were built to carry it. In the ancient world, the Ark of the Covenant was the centerpiece of divine connection. Crafted of acacia wood and overlaid with gold, it housed the tablets of the law, Aaron's rod that budded, and a golden jar of manna. Above it the cherubim extended their wings, and it was between them that the presence of God was said to dwell. The high priest would enter the most holy place once a year, with trembling hands and reverent heart, to approach what human words could barely describe the presence. But then something happened that changed everything. The veil was torn, the barriers removed, no longer hidden behind curtains or reserved for the few. The presence was loosed into the world, not to be chased, but to be welcomed. Not to be found in gold-covered boxes, but in living hearts. You don't need a title, a temple, or a tabernacle. You have breath, you have spirit, you are the dwelling. The human tendency, though, is to disqualify ourselves, to believe the sacred is for someone else, someone holier, someone more together. So we outsource our faith, hoping that proximity to someone spiritual will compensate for our own perceived emptiness. We say, if I can just get to that place, that speaker, that moment, maybe then I'll feel it, but the presence is not waiting on a stage. It's waiting on your attention. Consider the difference between the temple built by Solomon and the one rebuilt in your daily choices. Solomon's temple had grandeur, gold splendor that drew the world's attention. Your temple may look like a kitchen table, a messy living room, a silent commute, a cracked heart, but it is no less holy. In fact, it might be more so, because the divine isn't attracted to perfection. It's drawn to surrender. When you quiet yourself and choose presence over performance, you begin to sense it. The nearness, the weight, the glory, not found in thunder or fire, but in stillness. Like Elijah at the cave, discovering God not in the wind or quake, but in the whisper. You don't chase presence, you become aware of it. You don't need to carry a golden box when you carry the image of God in your soul. Every step you take can be sacred ground. Every conversation, a chance to minister. Every act of compassion, a priestly duty, not because you've earned it, but because you're available. The temple was never about the structure, it was about what happened inside. And the same is true for you. You can host holiness while still healing. You can carry the presence even with your past. You can walk in sacred rhythm while working a job, raising kids, or sitting alone in your room, wondering what comes next. The presence is not limited by your performance. It is empowered by your invitation. In the Old Testament, the ark went ahead of the people into battle. It was their strength, their assurance. When the ark moved, they moved. When it rested, they rested. That rhythm wasn't about the box, it was about alignment. Today, the same principle applies. When you carry the presence, you move differently. You don't run ahead in anxiety or drag behind in fear. You move with purpose, in time with something eternal. You are not empty. You are equipped. But the world will always try to tell you otherwise. It will shout that you are missing something, lacking something, needing something out there to complete what's inside. That's how it keeps you running, searching, spending. But what if the very thing you're seeking is already seated within you? Imagine walking into a room knowing you carry peace, not because you're pretending, but because you've nurtured it. Imagine facing uncertainty with stillness, because you know that presence goes before you, not as a theory, but as a lived reality. That's not reserved for mystics or monks. That's for you today. There's a reason the Apostle Paul calls us temples of the Holy Spirit. Not tents, not tools, temples. A place set apart, not just to house something holy, but to reveal it. A temple doesn't exist for its own sake. It exists to make the invisible visible. Every time you love someone who doesn't deserve it, you reveal the divine. Every time you forgive, you build a sanctuary in the midst of chaos. Every time you choose truth over convenience, you swing open the doors of the holy. But temples also need tending. Not in legalism, but in attention. Not to earn presence, but to remain aware of it. Just as the Levites had to care for the sanctuary, we too must be intentional. Guard your heart. Watch your thoughts. Feed your soul. Let worship become more than music. Let it be your posture. Gratitude, your incense. Compassion, your offering. This doesn't mean you'll always feel sacred. You won't. There will be days when you feel empty, far disconnected. That doesn't mean the presence has left. It means the noise has gotten loud. And in those moments, you don't need to strive. You need to return to stillness, return to breath, return to the truth that you are not alone. Think of how many people Jesus healed with just a word, a touch, a look. He wasn't carrying the ark. He was carrying authority born of intimacy. And he said, "As the Father has sent me, so I send you." That wasn't poetry, that was permission. You carry that same potential, not to impress, but to impact. In our modern world, we've made spirituality into a performance, a brand, a platform. But presence doesn't care about your audience size. It shows up where it's welcomed, in quiet rooms, in long walks, in whispered prayers between sobs. It shows up in hospitals, prisons, deserts, and dens. Anywhere a heart says, "Here I am." The weight of the ark was heavy. It required reverence. Mishandling it brought consequences. Today, what you carry is not lighter in meaning, only different in form. Your life is a vessel. Your words can build or break. Your presence can lift or drain. You don't carry a box, you carry influence, spirit, power. Use it well. You may think you're not qualified, that you've made too many mistakes, that the temple of your life is too broken to be holy. But the most sacred places in the world are not pristine. They are places where presence dwells despite the cracks. God has always chosen unlikely vessels, shepherds, fishermen, women with broken stories, men with stuttering tongues, because the treasure is not in the jar's perfection, but in its willingness to be filled. You are the temple, not by title, but by design. And in that sacred identity is both invitation and responsibility, not to perform, but to remain present, not to chase some external glory, but to honor the presence already within you. If you walk into every day with that awareness, you begin to shift atmospheres, not by force, but by presence. The same way light changes a room simply by being there. The same way salt transforms flavor just by existing in the recipe. You don't need to announce your holiness. You need only embody it. You are not waiting to become worthy of the presence. You were made for it, formed in love, filled with spirit, fashioned for communion. The ark was carried on shoulders. The Spirit now dwells in hearts. What once sat behind the veil now walks through cities, homes, and hearts through you.